Proportional Response. Book 1. Chapter 7, Part 2. Good Dog, Go Fetch. Hannibal felt the tension flow out of him as Henry started laughing, to be replaced with a different tension when the Duke abruptly stood and appeared to be trying to kill Henry with a look. Henry saw the look and continued to laugh. Not a small laugh, but a deep, roaring belly laugh with his head thrown back and his eyes closed. After a few moments, the man got himself under control, leaned forward, rubbed his eyes, and leveled a broad smile on the Duke. Line of achievement? Really? What have you ever achieved in your life that wasn't handed to you on a silver platter because some ancient ancestor of yours stood behind a bunch of men on a bridge and kept them from breaking? No, don't answer that, and don't stand there and try to tell me that ancient of yours did anything different. I have read the actual historical accounts. We dispute those accounts. Of course you do. Not near as much prestige if the ancient guy was a coward who stood behind his men instead of a great warrior. Huh? And that prestige is the only accomplishment you have, or have had, in your entire life. Lanthiu thumped the table in an attempt to interrupt. Henry thumped it hard enough to startle everyone and continued. I have a complete intelligence workup on you, which shouldn't come as a surprise. Mediocre grades at best, should have failed several classes, but couldn't allow a young duke to lose face like that, could we? Tried for sports, couldn't get anywhere with individual competition, so you found a team that needed the name enough to let you ride the bench and take the credit. I'll have you know I was the star player. I've seen the footage, you pompous dolt. The only reason you ever made a goal is because the other team let you. I don't even understand that sport, and I can tell that. You moved with all the grace of a lumbering ox. Oh, I'm sorry. Lumbering Lustuia. Your political career has been the same. Taking credit for the work of others because they needed your name attached to theirs to advance. How many times have those people left you in the dust, Havar? How many? The Duke yelled, grabbed the table, and tried to turn it over. It didn't budge. Hannibal tried to remain unnoticed while he watched Henry try to suppress a laugh as the Duke shouted, Enough! I will not sit here idly as some trumped-up peasant sits there and presumes that he can not only insult me, and not only insult my line, but does so while using my first name. I am Duke Havard, Lanthiu III, rightful master of the Society of Enital, ancestral lord of the Southern Reaches, son of Duke Havard, Lanthiu II, who was son of the great Duke Fictional Lanthiu, who was sired after a long line of great men going back to the dawn of Venda civilization, when you Deathworlders were still scrawling on the walls of caves, and I will. Henry had begun to make a strange sound, louder and louder, until he drowned the Duke out. Woof, 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 bow wow. Once the Duke stopped talking, his face orange with rage, Henry spoke. Good doggy. Such a good dog. Good, well-bred dogs know what to do when they are challenged, don't they? They recite their pedigree. After all, breeding is far more important than real accomplishment, isn't it? Silence. Peasant, not a chance, Havar. These negotiations are done. Humanity needs partners and allies who are capable of great things, not the coddled descendants of those capable of stealing the credit for great things. If the likes of you are what the Empire is going to send to help us, we will be better off without you. We will not tell you which government we will approach for the next Prime Minister, just know that the Venter will find themselves sitting on the sidelines. He hit a button on the desk, which caused the doors to unseal and swing open. You go back and tell your isolationist friends that you succeeded, and put an end to Her Majesty's grand plan to elevate the Venter to the highest prestige in the League. They will be pleased, I'm sure. So will the Conservatives, and Henry's face took on a downright predatory grin, and Hannibal couldn't discern why. The Navy hardliners will be ever so grateful that you saved them from an alliance with the obviously tactically inferior humans. Now, get out of my embassy. Events far more important than the likes of you have occurred ahead of schedule, and I need to tend to them. Several uniformed humans entered with their hands, very obviously not on their weapons, and they motioned for the Duke to move towards the door. He stood there shaking with rage, and his hand twitched towards his weapon. One of the humans took an abrupt, stomping step forward, and the Duke went pale. he and his party to move to the door, and Hannibal waited until they had reached it to stand. He had to grip the table to keep from shaking, and he spoke to Henry.
"Ambassador Archer, I believe there are matters we need to discuss, if you will permit me to stay."
He held his breath as he waited for Henry to respond, and kept his eyes locked on the man's face. It was Lanthiu who spoke first, however.
"Hannibal, I have given you your instructions, and I expect to see them obeyed. We are leaving. Now come along."
Henry gave him a look, one which seemed to ask if he was going to allow himself to be treated like that. He could feel a cold fire well up from his gut at the effrontery of this idiot. He had worked, bowed, scraped, and sacrificed all of his life to earn his place in this room, and this half-wit thought to order him like a dog. He turned his head and rose slowly to stand ramrod straight and stare HFY dead in the eye.
"No. And don't start with me. Your writ ended with these negotiations, which means that your ability to give me orders ended at that door."
He got hold of himself and realized that he shouldn't air the rest of what he had to say in front of the humans. He stalked over to HFY, who had decided to take the route of looking at him like a bug beneath his notice. He spoke in low tones so that only HFY and a few of the embassy staff could hear him.
"As Her Majesty's representative on this world, now that your writ has expired, the embassy and all of its staff are back under my authority with all that entails. Mrs. Corvar, you are to see the Duke back to the embassy directly with no other stops. Once you are there, you are to inform embassy security that he is leaving us presently. They are to see to it that he departs for the spaceport with minimal delay. He is to have no contact with any staff other than yourself and whatever honor guard you deem fit for a man of his station. You are to stay by his side through this time, to assist him in whatever manner seems appropriate to his illustrious station. I expect a full report from you on my desk tomorrow, which I expect to detail how you extended every courtesy to our guest and maintained the decorum required of his station at all times. Your Grace, I will not presume to tell you where you should, or shouldn't, go once your ship departs the spaceport, so long as you go away from here."
He turned his back to the Duke without waiting for a dismissal. He heard the man start to make an angry reply, but one of the humans closed the door before he could. Too much time with the humans indeed. Where did any of that even come from? He shook himself, as much to calm his nerves as to refocus, and walked to Henry with his hand extended. His friend had an odd smile on his face and clasped his hand with gusto. Before he could get his words out, Henry spoke.
"About damn time you stood up for yourself, Hannibal."
"Yes, too much time with them for sure."
"Her Majesty sends her respects to the human navy and wishes to convey to you that she is committed to these ongoing talks and maintaining our alliance, despite the concessions she is sure that will now require."
Henry's grin disappeared, and his eyes partially closed. The human studied him for some moments, without letting go of his hand. Then the grin slowly spread across his face again.
"My compliments to your queen, then. It appears that her intelligence community has stepped up their game. Tell me, are you at liberty to tell me how she found out so quickly? You know, Henry, I think that is the first time I have heard you refer to my queen with actual respect in your tone. Wait, found out what?"
Henry dropped his hand, and Hannibal nearly stepped back in disbelief. Henry stood there and blinked at him with an expression he never thought he'd see on the man's face. One of surprise.
"You mean you don't know? I have delivered a message to you as instructed. I do not understand what it means nor why. I would appreciate it if someone would inform me, however."
Henry chuckled at this, then gestured for him to sit down.
"Well, I am not exactly sure myself, since the entire political field shifted radically while we sat here. I don't know how exactly yet, but I do believe that this young man is about to clue us in."
A uniformed human, a low-ranking officer, came in and handed Henry a data crystal.
"Sir, I was informed that this information is eyes only. They attacked already?"
The man nodded. Then Henry closed his eyes and bowed his head, and his face turned a disturbing shade of red for a moment.
"Time. This is too soon. I haven't done even a third of the groundwork we need to do, and now I have... what? Days? Hours?"
He pounded his fist lightly for a human onto the table.
"I just don't have enough time."
The man looked sightlessly around the room shook his head, and took a deep breath. The red faded from his face.
Well, nothing for it then. We will do what we can with what we have, and pray it is enough.
He then turned to the young officer.
Break it down for me, son.
Hannibal felt some discomfort as the lieutenant began to stare pointedly at him. He shrugged and turned to leave the room, but Henry held up his hand.
If you and your men had been marching to signal defeat, I might want to keep this conversation private. However, as it stands, I am probably going to need this man's help. Having to repeat what you tell me will cost us time, so break it down for me. What's the word?
The uniformed man nodded.
The word is victory, sir, but at a great cost. Other than that, I suggest you watch the battle recording and see for yourself. You've seen it? We watched it happen, sir. The Arabso were still visiting when the attack came, and their commander apparently told their ship to take up station and record the battle. Well, some smart officer handed them a CC for Naval HQ, so the frogs sent the whole thing through live and HQ relayed it to us. They seemed to expect you to watch it as it occurred, sir. I had to promise to get this recording to you as quickly as possible.
Henry nodded to the young man.
Thank you. I guess I should watch it presently then. Care to stay and fill in the details for me?
The man nodded, and they all sat down to watch. Hannibal felt a little pain, deep down, every time he saw a human ship go dark, but couldn't find any sympathy for the exultant casualties. The young human kept up a running commentary throughout, helping them to understand each turning of the tide of battle. When the old machine appeared on the battlefield and everything abruptly ended, the young man continued in the same measured, dispassionate tones, explaining what the machine had done. Henry jumped out of his chair, cheered, slapped the soldier on the shoulder, and went for a bottle of his best scotch. He passed out 3 shots, sat, and toasted the old machines. Hannibal downed his drink and couldn't help himself. The question just came out.
How can you be so pleased when your entire force was destroyed? I just don't understand. Yes, one of your ships survived, and none of theirs did, but in a war of 1-to-1 attrition you will lose.